Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is KidNativeBloodyElbow.com, joined once again by Zane Simon, BloodyElbow.com as well. We have just finished the TUF 22 Ultimate Finale. Frankie Edgar, definitive first round KO knockout of Chad Mendes. I love Frankie Edgar. It was shaping up to be a great fight. The sudden ending was a total surprise, but brilliant performance by Frankie Edgar, and it's going to be hard to deny him a title shot no matter how much they don't want to give him one.
Yeah, I mean, I of all the ways I pictured this fight going, there was never in a million years that I picked Frankie Edgar by knockout round one. Like, I don't think anyone saw that coming, and frankly, it doesn't even sound like Dana White saw that coming because I don't know if you heard the post-fight speech, but Frankie Edgar immediately called out White for leaving before his fight and said that Dana White left because he didn't want to give him the title shot.
That is some drama. I missed that in my anxiety to get the show started. That's awesome. It gives Frankie a story. I mean, Frankie Edgar is a guy who was a lightweight champion. He dethroned possibly the greatest lightweight of all time in BJ Penn definitively in a 3-fight series. He fought 2 of the greatest fights ever against Gray Maynard, and yet nobody cares about Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar's not a popular fighter. There are not parades for Frankie Edgar. His hometown does not come over and take over Vegas when he fights. And yet now he's got this story. He's given Jose Aldo everything he could handle in a 5-round bout. And now if McGregor loses to Aldo, it's going to be really hard to say, well, we got to give him an immediate rematch because there's nobody else hunting for the title. I mean, it's going to be some drama. I still think they should give McGregor an immediate rematch just because of the money, but great performance, and he's got a story now. He's the guy who deserves a title shot, and boy, did he emphatically get it against Chad Mendes, who was fighting a very smart fight.
Yeah, no, Chad looked great. I mean, this fight, I will say this, Chad looked surprisingly a step slower with his hands than Edgar. Like, Edgar was landing 2 or 3 shots for
I
every
wasn't
one.
surprised by that. I expected Edgar to have the boxing edge, but Mendes had the kicking edge, and his strategy was so smart.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect, I guess I would say I didn't expect Edgar to have as much success landing strikes early, and Mendes have trouble actually returning fire. But
The hand speed edge, I will grant you, Frankie had an amazing hand speed edge tonight.
yeah, and that, I mean, because that really feels like what we came down to with the KO is that Mendes just was not mentally caught up to how fast the punches were coming at him.
No, and he was multiple steps behind by the time Frankie got into the second shot of that combination. I mean, and the way he clipped him on the nose like that, extremely painful way to get knocked out.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Feel a little sorry for Mendes. That's 3 of his last 4 he's lost now.
He's in what you call the lost battalion, as Eugene Robinson would say. He's got nowhere to go. I mean, he's unless he could win some fights if McGregor gets the title and holds it and stays in the division. Mendes is a few fights away from a title shot, but if Aldo holds the belt, nobody wants to see Mendes fight him again. If Edgar gets the belt, he still needs to get some wins to get a title shot. So, yeah, it's a tough break for Mendes, who's been fighting the best guys on the planet and fighting at a very high level. His one win in that 4-fight streak against Ricardo Lamas was just a deconstruction of a high-level fighter.
Yeah.
The only guy I want to see Mendes fight at this point is Uriah Faber. And they're pals. I don't even want to see that, but that's the one guy out there that I'd just be curious to see, where does Mendes stand against this guy? How do they stack up? That would be a fun fight. But otherwise, unless he can get a title shot against McGregor, man, he is headed for an exile into the wilderness. It's brutal, cruel fate for Chad Mendes, but it's a great night for Frankie Edgar, and definitely I'd be very curious to see what the ratings are and see how much people are paying attention to this fight. Clearly, Dana White doesn't want to give it any more oxygen than it's already got. But Edgar's on a 5-fight winning streak. He's looked great in that time, and here he comes. He's obviously the next guy for whoever wins the featherweight title tomorrow night.
Yeah, no, I mean it was a hell of a stamp. I do actually kind of just wonder how many people actually stuck around for the final fight on that card. Like
Yes.
it was a great stamp on the end of a night of fights. There were a couple of good ones, but it was a slog.
It was a slog. Mostly that's the Fox Sports One advertising. They larded up with so many ads. And even though to me the last four fights were all solid,
Yeah,
entertaining fights, the pacing of two of those four, you open up the main card with three straight decisions. Then you have a great fight with Ferguson and Barboza. We'll talk
yeah,
about
that
that in
was
detail in a moment. And then Ryan Hall against Lobov in the Ultimate Fighter finale, it was a full 3 round decision. To me, it was really exciting because Hall is so entertaining to watch with his grappling, and I saw multiple things I'd never seen before. But the momentum of it was slow. I mean, you've got three
I can
rounds.
tell you, like running the Twitter account, most people were not happy about that Ryan Hall fight. It was a
Yeah,
fine fight, but I think especially right after Ferguson Barboza, it just kind of felt kind of like a kick in the teeth. It was like I just watched the most exciting fight of the year, and now I'm watching an okay fight between two guys who limped their way into the UFC off tough
yeah, yeah.
as like second also Rands getting the finale spot.
And then it's a completely one-sided grappling bout in which Hall basically camped out in dominant positions for extended periods
Yep.
of time, wasn't able to get the submission, and really wasn't even threatening that many submissions. I mean, he was fighting a smart fight. He got ultimate dominant position, and he was working towards submissions and striking blows, but he wasn't taking any crazy risks. He wasn't risking the position to go for submission. So yeah, it just felt like a slog, and especially after the Gonzaga Erican fight. And boy, your boy
Oh god.
Konstantin Erokin,
Yeah,
man, that
I'm
guy,
done. I'm done. I'm
yeah.
done. I don't even want to hear it. I'm done.
Yeah, that guy. I mean, that was a terrible, tedious fight that went to like a
That was
zero action fight.
one of the I think maybe only two fights. It is the only one of only two fights in recent memory to get a 10-10 scorecard. The other being the actually pretty awesome Tough Japan finale, which was a draw. Got a
Yes,
10-10 round. But
for opposite reasons.
otherwise, yeah,
This
for
one
opposite
got 10
reasons.
10.
Like
It should have
they
got an
scored a
8-8.
yeah, I mean, not in the second round. Not, I don't think one strike was landed. Honestly, like I
And
don't remember anything happening in that round at all.
and that's not because it was a grappling chess match. But
No,
let's not spend all our time bitching about a shitty fight. We had a
no,
great fight in Edgar and Mendes, and Mendes. It's one of those fights. I'm thrilled by the quickness of the ending and happy for Edgar, but I feel robbed of getting to see what could have been a really interesting war because Edgar had the hand speed edge, which, as we saw, was definitive, but Mendes was really viciously chopping away at his legs. I mean, he wasn't firing a lot of leg shots, but the ones he was firing were counting. I mean, you heard him. They knocked Edgar way out of position. He didn't have time for you to start seeing bruising, but it was just a matter of time before serious bruising was going to start happening. Clearly, the game plan was to take Edgar's mobility away, but what they didn't count on was Edgar's hand speed, just lighting him up. And if Edgar can consistently do that, how could the guy not be popular to fans? You know?
yeah. I mean, it is weird. It really does feel like we got a great fight, but we were also robbed of what was supposed to be an awesome fight. Like it was supposed to be this great chess match, and it just ended up being a
Checkmate.
instant kind of outclassing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fool's mate in 5 moves, basically, in chess terms.
hmm
It was, just a brilliant performance by Frankie Edgar. It's one I would definitely recommend to watch if you didn't watch it, and I will watch it again because and I look forward to the breakdowns by Connor Rubish and other people of the striking, the details of the boxing that Edgar was doing because it was very sweet, very tasty, and so now we've talked about Ryan Hall and Lobov, but I do want to say Hall's transitions, his entrances, his takedowns, they were all very exciting. And to me, it's fun to see somebody bringing a breath of fresh air into MMA grappling.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I think if with Hall, with a good, consistent, strong camp, I believe he's spending a lot of time out of TriStar. he could really become a very fun, special fighter. He has the kind of jiu-jitsu that can make him a great talent down the road. I don't know that he has the athleticism. That's still my question mark.
He's
I think
definitely got
part
a
of the
limit, a ceiling. The ceiling on
yeah,
him is his athleticism. He is, but that's
yeah,
also what makes him intriguing, and that's what drew me into MMA in the first place, was watching Hoist
yeah,
Gracie deconstruct guys who were infinitely better athletes than him because he had the skill and knowledge base. And Ryan Hall's grappling, for a long time, jiu-jitsu's been neutralized. The really high-level jiu-jitsu guys have either not come into the sport or have not fared well, or like Jacare Souza, they've added so much else to their game. And Jacare is just an incredible athlete. So if you see
yeah.
Jacare destroy somebody with jiu-jitsu, you don't go, "Wow, that guy who looks like a superhuman freak just destroyed this other guy." You don't even notice the skills. You're like, "Oh, it's a human alligator here," and he beat some guy up. It's not surprising to see somebody that strong and
Yeah,
that quick.
Jacare is not Hoist Gracie yet. You're not like, oh my
Yeah.
God, he really, like the depth of his technical brilliance outclassed that opponent. I mean, it does, but it's also just like that Chris Camozzi fight where it looks like Chris Camozzi got thrown into a wood chipper, and
Yes.
you know,
Exactly.
there's not else going on.
And so it's fun to see somebody that seems like an ordinary guy athletically in Ryan Hall that can
Yeah,
compete. And it'll be interesting to see how he does. But I don't see him winning any titles or anything. But I do see him bringing a lot of cool ideas to MMA
yeah.
and putting on some really entertaining fights. And I'm glad to have him. But let's talk about Tony Ferguson and Edson Barboza. You called it one of the best fight of the year.
Might be. I mean, it's close. It is. It's. I don't know if it's up. If it's the
The
best.
stakes weren't
Mendes,
high enough.
Aldo, and Lawler McDonald is probably the best fight of the year.
Ooh, yes. I mean, that was a title fight. The brutality levels in that fight,
Yeah,
just thinking about that fight makes my face hurt. That fight, and to me, Rousey Holm, the stakes were so high and the drama was so high, even if it was a pretty crappy one-sided beatdown. But Ferguson
I would
Barboza,
still say top five.
Rousey
Top
Holm is
five.
top five, or
No, no,
Ferguson
no, no.
Barboza.
This Rousey
Yeah,
Home.
yeah.
I'm done with that.
Okay, yeah. Ferguson Barbosa is it was the only thing holding it back is the stakes. It's not a championship fight. Both of these guys have interesting personalities. Well, actually, I don't know anything about Edson Barbosa's personality since he throws a lot of awesome kicks. But Ferguson, was on the Ultimate Fighter and is didn't make a lot of fans on that show, or people don't
No, he
like it.
was vilified off tough.
Yeah, yeah, he came across very unlikable, and yet he's very fun to watch fight, and he hasn't done anything since then.
No.
And the shout out to his unborn child and everything. It's almost like he's got good PR coaches, trying to rehab his image from one just unfortunate slip. But the fight itself, really, really nice fight because Barbosa fought a great fight, and Ferguson fought an even better fight to beat him.
Yeah, I mean, Barboza looked better than ever. That is absolutely the best version of Edson Barboza I've ever seen. I saw people like talking about it afterwards, like, oh, well, Edson Barboza has to work on his sub defense and his wrestling and stuff like that. I was like, dude, that is not what happened in that fight. You need to be like, you need to figure yourself out because Edson Barboza looked absolutely amazing. And the fact that Tony Ferguson beat him is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it was because Ferguson. It was not an easy win. I mean, Ferguson took some hard shots. Both guys were cut up, both in the left eye or above the left eye in Barbosa's case, and Barbosa's kicks, like they were saying, Stan and Anik in the commentary, does not telegraph those kicks. They come so fast and so hard, the spinning kicks, and when Ferguson caught him with that elbow coming in, Ferguson, the knock on Barboza has been if you can pressure him, if you can charge him, you can take him out of his game early. And Ferguson was looking to do that early, was doing that, made the mistake with the illegal ground kick, and then Barboza started to open up on him at range. Barboza did a great job of landing range strikes while somebody's coming forward at you. I mean, his movement was really, really good, and Ferguson just kept coming. He just kept coming and finally got the takedown in the Darce choke.
Yeah, I would say that Barboza, a lot of his classic problems with dealing with pressure look gone. Like I didn't see a fighter there who got hit and didn't know what to do. In that fight, when every time Barboza got hit, he would come right back with a counter, right back with a big, a big strike of his own. Was just he and knew how to move out, did all these like great little things. And it just came down to the fact that, yeah, Ferguson was totally undaunted, has enough variety to really keep people guessing and throw them off constantly. And then that front headlock sub game of his is just absolutely deadly. And what do you do about that? I mean, guy's got a go-to move. That's not something that you can just say like, oh, Edson Barboza needs to work on not getting caught in Tony Ferguson's darce.
That's a
You know?
lifetime. That's something you could spend a lifetime working on if you're
Yeah.
training with the dude. And you don't get to train with him. You don't get to train with anybody even approaching his game at those front chokes. And front chokes, the Darce choke's have been one of these developments, I'd say, in the last 5 years of MMA that's been very exciting to see. It's something that catch wrestlers have said this is the way wrestlers should be working on submissions. If you've got a natural wrestling game, this is the family of submissions that's going to be the most dangerous, the most effective, the most widely applicable. And it's great to see Ferguson apply it. Ferguson's a guy, when he first came out, like as a fan, my main interest is stylistic evolution. What are these guys doing that's interesting? Or do they execute something really beautifully well? And Ferguson to me was like, he's another wrestle boxer. But he's become so much more than that now with the leg attacks and the Darce chokes. He's got a really sweet submission game. The elbows, really nice game from Ferguson.
Yeah, what's great to me to see is that if you think back to his Danny Castillo fight, and that fight was just god awful. But in that fight, he kept going for all this funky grappling, none of which really worked at all.
No.
He barely won a split decision from the bottom, trying this funky grappling game out, and it just seemed like such a terrible mistake. And I kind of wrote him off at that point. I was just like, oh my God, what is he doing? This guy does not know how to fight to his strengths, but he's really stuck with it and turned that into a really evolved, dangerous style. Like now when he's pulling for these submissions, when he's rolling for leg locks, when he's doing all this crazy shit, like it's actually dangerous. It's no longer the guy who's just kind of suddenly, in the midst of outboxing somebody, flailing on some random knee bar that's nowhere close to happening.
Yeah. And because he's got really good wrestling skills and really good boxing skills and really strong athleticism. He's a strong, dangerous guy. He can take more risks with his submission game. He's not upset if the guy gets away from him on the ground. They have to stand back up. He's not worried about losing position and, oh God, this guy's just going to outmuscle me and beat the crap out of me on the ground. I mean, he's very well rounded. And like you say, it was sort of a mad scientist moment in that Castillo fight where you're like, what is this idiot doing? And then, he comes through with, obviously there's been some sustained application in the gym and some really good coaching. Who is his jiu-jitsu coach anyway?
I have no idea. He's listed here at Team Death Clutch, but I know that he also has trained a lot out of a Cali gym that I'm trying to remember now. That's like specializes in boxing a lot, and I feel like he's one of those guys who like his main gym is kind of boxing specific, and then he goes to other places to get other things, and I really don't know.
Yeah,
honestly,
it's an interesting approach, and he's like not with one of the big camps. This is American Top Team. It's not Greg Jackson. It's not the Black Zillions.
Let's see. It says here he might be at Rain. Maybe.
Then that is a bigger camp, but not his main guy.
Yeah, I mean the main one is Knuckleheads. That's the boxing gym he's at most of the time that he came up with, and that's like where he got his start as with his decent hand game and all that was through them. So.
And he's obviously added a lot, and he was supposed to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, the oft injured, sort of uncrowned lightweight champion in waiting. And it's very frustrating. Although, as well as Barboza fought, you can't say, oh, man, we were robbed of a great fight. But I would love to see Ferguson against Nurmagomedov. And also I'm worried about Khabib. I mean, the guy's been injured and injured again. And this is the sort of thing. This lightweight division has been jinxed with a couple of fighters that were cruising to title shots and had strings of injury. Who's the guy I'm thinking of that's now working in a Canadian coal mine? He got the concussion in the off training.
Oh, TJ Grant.
TJ Grant, yeah, who was really on a run, and now Nurmagomedov, you know, he wins fights, gets hurt in training, and we haven't seen him in a long time. So hopefully he can get back. And Ferguson, though, he's in
He
the
looks like a
title
title
mix lightweight.
challenger.
What?
Yeah, he looks like a title challenger. He looks ready to contend. I want
Oh
to see him
yeah,
fight for the belt. You know,
yeah. And so who's RDA fighting next? What's going on there?
he's fighting Donald Cerrone next week.
Next week? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's on Fox. You're right. That is your this complete criminal negligence on my part. I
Well, no,
actually
I mean
did
we
know
got
that part of my.
194 tomorrow. That's all I care about.
Yeah,
You know,
it's true, but it's amazing that the lightweight title, like RDA Rafael dos Anjos against Donald Cerrone, is next week on Fox. Yeah, the UFC's they've got it going on this month. I got to hand it to them.
oh yeah,
They've played off the massive success of the Rousey Holm fight, and these three. I was skeptical going into the 3 nights of fights, but it's actually turned out to be pretty fun. And the traffic's been good. The interest seems to be high. So now we're going into the big fight tomorrow night. And yeah, so yeah, Ferguson seems like totally primed to take on the winner of RDA and Donald Cerrone.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just looking. You know, who else is at the top of that division right now? Michael Johnson is fighting Nate Diaz for some reason.
Yeah, and Johnson's nowhere near ready for a title shot. I mean, I could see scenarios where they have to rush him into one, but yeah, and Nate Diaz
Yeah.
is he's down at number 14, but to
And
me
then
it's like
Khabib is
14 with
3, and
yeah.
Bendo, I believe, was the other guy in the top. Oh, and Eddie Alvarez is 4, and he's fighting Anthony Pettis. So you know, I would rather see it. I would frankly rather see Ferguson get it than the winner of Alvarez Pettis right now.
Yeah,
Unless
yeah.
one of them can put on an absolutely stunning performance in their fight. But Ferguson seems like the guy who's got all the momentum at the moment.
Yeah, Pettis and Alvarez, though, that could be a very exciting fight, and it will be a higher profile fight than this one was tonight. So
Yeah.
things could change, but as of this moment, yeah, I'm with you. I'm ready for Steve Ferguson a title shot. He's certainly earned one and gone on a great roll, and we hope Nurmagomedov can get healthy and get back out there. And there were a number of fights on this card that were supposed to happen and didn't. We had Mirsad Bektic drop out against who's supposed to fight Tatsuya Kawajiri, and then we had Justin Scoggins drop out at flyweight as well. So,
Yep.
but you know the card. It's not one of those for a card that had 3 mid-tier injuries, wreck fights. That's not what I'm thinking about with this card. So.
No.
The next fight down was Evan Dunham against Joe Lozon. This was another one that was a slog because it was completely one-sided, yet went to three rounds.
Yeah, like Dunham looked better than ever. He fought a great fight. This is, you know, he's one of those guys I think who got written off kind of right as he was peaking as a prospect because he got thrown into these really hard fights, like way over his ability. And it was like, oh, well, he's just kind of a bum. And he has continued to improve all through that. And now on the other side, it's like, oh, we're actually seeing, the very best version of him right now. And he fought great, but Joe Lozon does not look like he has it anymore.
No, that's why I'm not sharing your excitement over Dunham because Lozon has not looked. He had that war with Jim Miller and has not, to me, looked the same since. Like he had the fight with Michael Johnson where it was obvious he had never learned how to slip a jab. He picks up a couple wins and then gets blitzed by Ali Quinta. Blitz is Takanori Gomi, but if you want to talk about shot fighters, I believe that Takanori Gomi just replaced Sakuraba in the dictionary under that category. So, but yeah, I think they train together too.
I know. Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm getting depressed here because Lozon, he looks shot. He looks shop worn, and he looks like he just can't do the things he used to do. I mean, he couldn't pull the trigger. He was 3 steps behind all fight. He fought hard. You can still see that same scrappiness there. He was pushing Dunham and making Dunham work all fight, but he was getting massively outstruck.
Yes, massively outstruck. Although dude has a chin and a ton of heart, but he's only 31 years old and he's not improving anymore. And I don't
Yeah,
know where he
he's been
goes from
fighting
here.
for since 2004. It's an old 31.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's just one of those things where he's had an incredible run. I mean, talk about a guy with limited athletic gifts. Not that he's not a good athlete, but he's not
Yeah,
somebody who's like just an amazing natural physical talent. And he's never even really had a skill set that was just super overwhelming. He's not like an incredibly great grappler. He's certainly not a great wrestler, and definitely not a great kickboxer. But he used all three elements well, mixed them together, was a really good martial artist. Never put together, a run at serious contention or anything. But he was in the division one of the toughest divisions for a long ass time, fighting
yeah.
top guys and acquitting himself very, very well. And
Oh yeah.
and so yeah, it is sad to see where he is in his career right now. And hopefully, I mean, this is a guy with other things. Like this is a guy with a brain. I don't see any upside to him taking more brain damage. When there's no reason to. So, that's that. But Dunham, I don't know. We'll see. I'd like to see Dunham fight a tougher fight next time and see where he is.
I don't know that he's going to make any kind of run, but he's like top 15 to 20 right now,
Yeah, he's on that range between gatekeeper and contention. I'd like to see him. Who beat Jim Miller last night?
Michael Chiesa.
Yeah, that might be
That'd be a good fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all right, and so now let's talk about featherweight. Tatsuya Kawajiri against Jason Knight. Completely pointless fight. It's not anybody's fault. Kawajiri is supposed to fight Mirsad Bektic, like I said, and Bektic had to drop out. 2 weeks' notice, Jason Knight steps up in the UFC with an eccentric rubber guard game, and Kawajiri is like the last guy on earth you want to go into a fight with if that's your game. And you're on 2 weeks' notice, and you're making your UFC debut.
Yeah, you're going against one of the better top control grapplers in the entire sport with a rubber guard game. That is absolutely the worst way to go.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
No surprises there at all.
Yeah, there was a slight surprise in that Knight threatened something early on, but it wasn't even. I don't even know how serious a threat it was. But for a second, you're looking, this is kind of interesting.
He looked good and dangerous, and Stan was talking about like his legs never get tired. He can do this all fight, and then by the end of the second round, Kawajiri's just shucking him and moving straight to half guard and into mount and all that, and it's just like he can't do this all fight.
But it wasn't very entertaining, and it didn't get Kawajiri anywhere, and so less said about it, the better. But then the card opened up with lightweights Julian Rosa and Marcin Vosik. Split decision, another long, tedious decision.
Yeah, it was scrappy and ugly, and Rosa stays in the UFC, Vosik doesn't, and they both become bottom of the featherweight division, or Rosa becomes kind of bottom of the featherweight division talent to face those guys.
Yeah, and since it came on the heels of that Gonzaga Orokin fiasco, it killed the momentum of the fight. But before that, with welterweight Ryan LaFleur beating Mike Pierce, that was an entertaining, vicious brawl. Fight. Yeah, I mean, Pierce had the hematoma. It looked like an iPhone glued to his head underneath the skin, and but at the end of the fight, if you go by my old school standards of who was winning at the very end of the fight, Pierce was winning at the end of the fight. I mean, LaFleur dominated the whole rest of the fight, but that third round, Pierce was dominating.
Pierce is like, just I think from genetic makeup, Pierce is like one of the few guys that can be a pure wrestle boxer in the modern MMA game, but below middleweight, because everything above middleweight is just kind of free for all, or middleweight and up is just kind of free for all clusterfuck. But below middleweight, it's become a much more like LaFleur was doing much more the modern MMA style. Lots of kicks, leaping in with lots of big strikes, lots of movement, mixing everything together really smoothly. And there's Mike Pierce, and he's just like, head punch, head punch, head punch, shoot for the low single move to the double, try to slam you down.
When you're built like a human garbage truck, you can do that. Like his upper body is just an incredible thing. It is so thick, the neck muscles, and and he's obviously got some pop in his hands and can take an incredible beating.
Yeah, he just soaked up a ton of damage in that fight, kept coming after LaFleur, and LaFleur's always been a little, especially as he gets tired, he's a little chinny, a little hittable, and that cost him at the end. 10-point must scoring system, I thought that LaFleur won it, but yeah, in the old school sense, Pierce, he acquitted himself well with the style that's kind of outmoded.
Yeah, to me, like if these two guys had been in an alley somewhere with no referees, Pierce was going to come out on top, and I'd say that
Yeah.
might happen more than 50% of the time, just having watched him take everything LaFleur had to throw at him. But in a sport fight context, LaFleur dominated the fight. It was a unanimous decision. I can't argue with that. Although the guy who gave the 30-27 score to LaFleur, I don't know if he just tuned out after the first two rounds or what the deal was there. But really good performance. I won't say brilliant performance by Ryan LaFleur because, like I said, he spent the end of the third round just getting his ass beat. I mean, he caught a hard punch.
Yeah. Early in the fight, he looked great. He looked better than ever early, moving really well, striking way better than he has before. His defense was better than ever. It was just, he was in front of somebody he couldn't hurt. And as that goes on, it just wore on him.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but still, he's 12-1. He's got, 5-6 fights in the UFC now, and is 5-1 in the UFC. So, I don't see him as a contender, but I see him. Where is he in the ranking?
He's like bottom of. He's. I think he had a brief moment where he was like 15, and I just see him right in that 10 to 15 range as a guy who is athletic enough and well-rounded enough to really challenge a lot of fighters, but he is still a little hittable. He is still a little chinny, and he's not exactly dominant anywhere. And against the very top 10 kind of guys, that's going to get him beat.
Yeah. Like I see Kelvin Gastelum just steamrolling him if they were to meet up, and Gunnar Nelson. He could beat Gunnar Nelson. I think. I'm not so sold on Gunnar Nelson. Rick Story, Tarek Safadine. I mean, those guys all, in the top 15 are guys I think he could compete with quite well, with the exception of Galveston, Gastelum, I mean. And so next we got flyweights Gene Herrera and Joby Sanchez. That was a really fun little 2-round fight with nice momentum swings.
Yeah, Herrera is still raw, but he is a great athletic prospect in the division. Like, Sanchez was the cleaner technician, the cleaner striker, was outworking him for for the first round and for some of the second. But Herrera's just faster and stronger
and hits a lot harder.
And eventually that wins out for a lot of guys.
Yeah. It was a similar dynamic to the LaFleur-Pierce fight, except Herrera had even less pop in his punches, and Sanchez had less pop in his punches, and Herrera had a lot more relative. To what Sanchez had. So really good fight. Looking forward to seeing more of Gene Herrera, and definitely won't complain next time I see Joby Sanchez either. And then lightweight Chris Gritzmacher and Abner Lloveras. This wasn't a terrible fight for a 3-round decision between Ultimate Fighter guys opening up a card. Gritz was throwing some nice body shots, and you actually scored that for Lloveras.
I scored it for Lloveras. I thought that he did enough early. I thought his submission offense at the end of the first round, I think he had 3 submission attempts in the first round, at least one of which was really close, and I thought that was the biggest scoring moment of the first round.
Really? See, I thought that one was a legit threat. I don't remember being worried about the other two. And I thought Grutzmacher landed some hard shots in the first round.
I thought, the submission came close to finishing the fight. So to me, that was the thing. It was like the most.
I could see. I'm giving him. I think it's a 29-28 fight, and I think that's the round Lloveras won. But you had Lloveras winning the whole fight.
Well, yeah. Then the second round, everybody scored for him. I don't think anybody gave Grutzmacher all 3.
No. But I haven't seen the judges' card, so I don't know which round they gave to him. But all 3 of them gave him 2 out of 3 rounds.
Yeah, and then I thought Grutzmacher pretty clearly won the third. So
yeah.
It was just I thought that Lloveras had won the first and second, and then lost the last one. So,
I'd have to
but
watch it again, and I'm not
it's
that
not a
interested.
fight I care about. I mean,
No, these guys
I
are
don't
not
know.
going to stay
It was
around.
okay, but
Yeah,
these guys are the kind of guys that they will be feeding, tough Latin America winners
yes,
to.
yes,
Like they're filler for prospects at this point. And
yeah, yeah, and that's where we are with the Ultimate Fighter show. I mean, at this point, they couldn't even field the tournament winner. Didn't even get into the finale, and
no,
Hall lost to a guy who Saul Rogers. I don't even know if he'll be back in the UFC after he lied on his visa application. That's a major party foul.
right.
Uh,
And it sounds like he might, at least from what I asked people on Twitter if anybody knew what he lied about, and a
the
lot of the
sorts of
instant
things you
reaction.
lie about on a visa application are frequently criminal record.
Yeah, exactly. That was a lot of the thing that people said. Other people said like, "Oh, well, I heard he just filled it out wrong," but the UFC is going pretty hard on this "he lied" narrative. Like they don't sound happy about it. If it was
No,
like, "Oh,
they
he filled
don't.
it out
Again, no.
wrong,"
As soon as you said the UFC is going hard on a narrative, I was like, you know,
I mean,
you got a
yeah, but
you got an
I think
unreliable narrator there. But
they are. But I think if it were something like, "Oh, he just screwed up and made some dumb mistake," they're usually pretty like forgiving with fighters about that kind of thing. Like, "Oh,
especially if
he
they've
was just a
invested a
dumb
whole
kid."
season of the Ultimate Fighter in the dude, like
Yeah,
they want the guy to
exactly.
succeed, and if they're throwing him,
If they're just burying him, then I have to assume that it's probably criminal, and he's probably not ever going to be available to fight in the UFC.
it's quite possible. We've seen a number of fighters who've had various black marks on their record that have had a hard time coming to the U.S. Paul
Yeah,
Daly and Bellator is one that comes to mind quickly, although he's I think cleared that up. But for years,
yeah.
Glover Teixeira couldn't get into the U.S. And I was never sure if it had anything to do with his
He
record or it was
overstayed
just
his visa. That was the why. He was on a travel visa to the US when he was training with Chuck back in the day, and he overstayed it and got deported. And
and
so,
that's not something they like. So
yeah,
yeah. So, but yeah. So no telling what Saul Rogers did. But anyway, the long and short of it is, you had one of the UFC's biggest stars in Conor McGregor on the show, and he's it's just it was a weird season. You had Conor McGregor and Uriah Faber, which didn't add anything to the drama of it. If they'd had Jose Aldo on the show, then it builds into the coaches battle. But as it
no,
is,
Jose Aldo was never going to do that.
no, he's and it would have been terrible television anyway. Maybe it would have been interesting. I don't know. It would have had stakes, but
It would have been interesting. It would have been fun, but I can't imagine Jose Aldo, the relationship he has with the UFC and how little he seems to enjoy being like in
yeah,
front of cameras doing interviews, be like volunteering himself for that show.
yeah, and so yeah, so it just sort of the Ultimate Fighter, once was the marquee of the UFC. It's what made him broke him in the US with the famous Forrest Griffin run in the first season of Ultimate Fighter. But it's been so long since the show consistently produced contenders, and just it is what it is, and it just sort of blurbed
Yeah,
out
even
here.
if it produces good talent, which I think it often does, it's just not worth watching. I mean,
No,
every TV show has a shelf life, and even reality TV where it's also always supposed to be different people and different life stories and all that. When the format's the same and the setup's the same, after a while, it's all the same shit. Like
yeah.
people aren't that different. They don't create that different a
And the
TV.
people editing the show are actually the creators of the show and have so much
Exactly.
leeway that they, creatively run dry. And that's where we are with Ultimate Fighter. I mean, I just have no interest in the show, even with Conor McGregor on it. And there was some stuff coming out of it with the McGregor inserting himself into the whole Faber, TJ Dillashaw, Team Alpha Male, Bang
Mhm.
Ludwig scenario, which was actually pretty sporting to McGregor to push
Yeah.
those guys. And he definitely did the UFC a solid by being on the show, but it's not like he blew the doors off with the ratings or anything. I wouldn't say he was. Now, the biggest to me bust in Ultimate Fighter history would have been Brock Lesnar, who was a
Who
huge
notably
star.
tanked the ratings.
Yes,
That
yes,
was when they were riding high, and they notably fell off with
yeah.
him on it.
Yeah, and people had such high expectations for him. At this point, I don't think people invest any expectations in the Ultimate
No.
Fighter, and McGregor, entertained on that But anyway, we're going to be talking about Conor McGregor a lot tomorrow night, so we might as well wrap this up. Quick rehash: Frankie Edgar knocked out Chad Mendes in the first round, 2 minutes 28 seconds. Incredible. Was it a left hook or a right hook that ended it on the nose?
I think it was the left, I want to
Yeah,
say.
I want to say it was a left, and it clipped him on the nose. The only punch I can remember that clipped somebody in the nose like that was BJ Penn against GSP the first time they fought, when BJ clipped just a pure clip when you catch somebody hard, full contact, but you only connect with the nose, which is so painful. Your nose basically goes one direction, your head goes the other, and that turned GSP's nose into a blood faucet. But this one, I didn't see any bleeding, but it knocked Mendes right out, and Edgar was quick to capitalize in what was looking like it was shaping up to be a very interesting fight, because Mendes was landing some hard leg kicks, but Edgar's hand speed made the difference. Then you had Ryan Hall claim the Ultimate Fighter title with a 3-round utter domination of Artem Lobov, but not a fight that I think scintillated many fans. And then Tony Ferguson submitted Edson Barboza late in the second round, Darce choke, in a great fight. Zane calls one of the top 5 fights of the year. I'd have to write it down on paper. My memory is too porous to think in terms of a whole year of fights.
Just say you loved it. Just say you loved it.
It was awesome. It was very fun. I was paying attention the whole fight. Lots of excellent violence and some real skill and strategy by both guys. So it's basically, I'd still think, even given the pacing for a Fox Sports 1 card, this was as good as it gets, I think. It's not quite as good as it gets, but I'm happy.
When you get 2 really great fights on a card, it's hard to be upset. Like, when you
2
get
great fights that matter.
Yeah. When you get an amazing lightweight fight that has title shot implications for the winner.
Immediate title shot implications.
Yep. And then you get a really shocking main event.
Yeah, the featherweight.
I'm too disappointed.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, Edgar wouldn't say he shocked the world, but he certainly shocked Chad Mendes and surprised most people watching. And so it sets up an immediate demand for a title shot on the part of Frankie Edgar, which he probably will not get unless Conor McGregor just demolishes Jose Aldo to the point that nobody wants to see an immediate rematch. Or Aldo does the same to McGregor. But if Aldo and McGregor is all everybody is hoping it be, everybody's thinking immediate rematch, because there's just money.
It does line Edgar up for an injury replacement, though. That's always just a good place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a guy who trains you around. So anyway, and we'll be back tomorrow night with the UFC 194 6th round. That is a stacked card. The prelims I'm not so excited about. There's some decent fights, but the pay-per-view itself is easily the most on paper stacked card. You've got the featherweight title fight, plus you've got the middleweight title fight with Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold in a fight that I don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. Very intriguing matchup. Then you got Jacare Souza versus Joel Romero, an explosive middleweight contenders bout. Demian Maia versus Gunnar Nelson in a very fun welterweight fight. And then featherweight Max Holloway and Jeremy Stephens. And another fight, Max Holloway is a guy, he gets a big win. He's in the title picture as well. So fun fight tomorrow night, and we'll be back with the 6th round. So remember, give us a thumbs up on YouTube right here underneath the screen. Subscribe to MMANation.com on YouTube, and you'll know about all the shows we do. You can also subscribe to MMA Nation on iTunes and get these in podcast form. And follow us on Twitter at KidNate, at TheZaneSimon. Read us on BloodyElbow.com. We'll be back tomorrow night. Adios, MMA aficionados. This is Kid Nate. We'll see you next time.